Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 3. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us here this Monday, Steelers Nation. Off day for the Pittsburgh Steelers from training camp, but not an off day for us, as we'll recap the first 4 days of padless practices and get ready for Tuesday, the big day the pads come on. The evaluation begins and football will really officially feel like it's back. But we are in full swing. Team's doing a great job. Dave, you're doing a great job. And it's been just a really good couple of days.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch the start of camp here. And Alex, I think we do have football this week, right? The Hall of Fame game. Is that correct? On
Thursday.
Texans versus the Bears. And then the Texans obviously will play the Steelers the following Friday night as part of their first preseason game. And then obviously in this upcoming week on Friday is the annual Friday Night Lights practice. And that's always fun and enjoyable. And you have Sirius Radio out there and getting a couple different type interviews. So yeah, after this, and then obviously Tuesday, as you said, the pads go on, and we're waiting to see if maybe the debut of one Russell Wilson happens on Tuesday as well, too. So even though it's an off day for the team, not an off day for us, but we have a lot to talk about here after the first 4 days of training camp.
We do, and I'm not even sure where to begin, to be honest with you. Probably an injury standpoint and touching base on that is a good place to start, especially since the biggest injury news revolves around the starting quarterback of this team, Russell Wilson, who has not practiced in the team period so far due to a calf strain issue that he suffered during the conditioning test. Apparently, they were pushing sleds out there. I think we can cross off the have quarterbacks push sleds on the next year's training camp agenda, right, Dave?
Yeah, that's still, I'm still kind of befuddled by all that. But whatever kind of sled that Russell Wilson had to push, I'm not sure I'd do that again. Missed the first 4 days with the calf issue. I mean, nobody's acting like it's serious at all, but it was serious enough to cause short-term misery for him, the way Mike Tomlin put it a couple of times this past week. And after the practice on Sunday, he said, he expects Russell Wilson back out there. I'm trying to find the exact, because I think you can kind of parse this up a little bit here. He said that with Russ worked partially today, meaning Sunday, and expect him to get going a bit as we come off this off day.
And I expect the same. I mean, he has done a little bit more each day, even working in some capacity the individual period on Sunday, doing some straight dropbacks, not going through every drill, not going through some of the ones that required more mobility, but if you didn't know he was injured, if Tomlin wasn't providing the update, if Wilson hadn't spoken with the media in detail what's going on with him, you'd think he's fine. If you saw him just walking around and throwing, I mean, he looks healthy. So I think the team is just being overly cautious with him. You don't want a short-term thing, a small thing to become a bigger thing. Mentioned this on the special edition episode. Joe Burrow had a calf injury last year, pushed through it, probably shouldn't have, and it really dogged him in this offense throughout the beginning portions of the season. So I expect Wilson to be out there in some capacity on Tuesday in team period. Maybe it's not every single rep he would normally get, but I really have no concern, no reservations about his status. He'll be out there much, much sooner than later.
All right. Don't tell me about the labor pain. Show me the baby. Get him out there.
You'll get him out there on Tuesday. I'm pretty confident in saying that.
All right. What else is happening on the knock on wood short injury list so far?
The biggest injury, I guess, quote unquote, so far is not a huge one, but tight end Rodney Williams, according to Mike Tomlin, confirming it is an AC joint sprain in his shoulder that was suffered on Saturday during a 7-on-7 period, making a diving attempted catch against Cam Sutton, landed hard on his shoulder. He did not practice on Sunday. Tomlin called that probably a couple of days, probably going to be maybe later this week. For a guy like Williams to try to get back, and that'll be valuable time missed in a pretty tight battle with Michael Pruitt. Those guys were getting a decent amount of work and both working on special teams. That's Williams' calling card. So the sooner he can get back, the better. Other than that, it's really been, not much to note. And that's, of course, good news. I'm sure injuries will begin to pile up with the Pats coming on and these drills going live and much more physical and much more contact. Pittsburgh's camps are notoriously known for being among the most physical in the NFL. Guys that are still on active PUP, no status change that I'm aware of there. And Cole Holcomb, Dean Lowry, Cordero Patterson has done some light work on the side with that hamstring injury, but he's still probably going to be a week or two at least away.
I guess one of the kind of minor things to watch here is before Tuesday practice gets underway is if they bring in an extra tight end for if Rodney Williams is going to be out of the lines this next week.
It's possible, but they were pretty tight end heavy to begin with. You got 4 guys to go through practice. I think you can get away with that. And maybe even if you had to use a Coletto there for a rep or two, you could probably ask him to stand in. So I wouldn't expect it, but can't say for sure.
All right.
Where to from here, Dave? Just kind of an overall general view, or do you want to talk more about Wilson and Fields? Because that is, of course, with the national media especially, been the headline story. Fields getting the reps, Wilson not working because of the injury. People speculating, especially NFL Network. I've seen a lot of commentary from somebody like Mike Garafolo really thinking this is an open quarterback battle. Does the Wilson injury and what you've at least heard and seen the videos from Fields so far sway you at all in terms of thinking that this could be a real battle?
Well, I think it's a bigger question for you than me because you've been out there actually watching them. But it from the get-go of the start of training camp, and obviously with Russell Wilson being sidelined, it does seem like all these national guys are running with, hey, Justin Fields has a legitimate shot at this. It's not as clear cut. Russell Wilson as most people think. However many different ways you can say that, it feels like it's being said by NFL Network, ESPN. I mean, all the national media outlets at this point. So, nothing in. I mean, Russell Wilson hasn't even been out there yet. I don't know how you can lose the job, that way. I suppose you could attack it from the angle that Justin Fields has looked so good that he would push from that angle. So, I mean, really, it's more of a question for you because I read your reports and the amount of clips that I see coming out there is just very limited on top of it. So do you believe that 4 days into training camp that there should be a whoa, wait a minute here, that's an overreaction, or do you have the notion of, yeah, look, this thing could very well end up going in Justin Fields' direction?
My thoughts are unchanged that Russell Wilson will be this team's week 1 starting quarterback at Atlanta, barring something dramatic happening. And really, I said it'd be injury. And while there is an injury with Wilson right now, it is so minor that it's not going to impact his week 1 status unless it were to get re-aggravated somehow whenever he returns to practice again. That's why this team is being ultra careful with him and really just diligent about making sure he's 100% before he's out there in full capacity. And Fields, in terms of his performance, it has been to me what we've seen from his Chicago days. Some really impressive moments. I think the physical talent is obvious, the speed, the burst, and some of the read option, had a design quarterback run for him in 7 shots he scored on yesterday. The arm strength, I think his deep ball placement, is really impressive as well. Some of the deep throws he's had to Van Jefferson, George Pickens, the slot fade to Pat Frymuth. There's really good accuracy on those vertical throws. I think he has made overall a lot of good decisions and gone through his reads. I've seen him work progressions. And so I don't want to just talk about the physical with Fields. I think mentally there's been some improvement as well, but we've seen a lot of the inconsistency, scattershot placement, accuracy, especially underneath some routine throws that were too high or just missed that should have been completed, and stacking some bad plays. I thought Sunday He had a good 7 shots series, couple of touchdowns for the offense. But then in team period, he was winning through the first pick on a bad ball to Scotty Miller, near pick a couple plays later, almost overthrew Jalen Warren on a screen. So the footwork probably needs a little bit of work overall, being more consistent mechanically. I'm just seeing some of that variance, that high-low play that has been common throughout his career. So nothing is really telling me, and things can change, but nothing is really indicating that this quarterback battle has changed at all through the first 4 days.
Yeah, look, I mean, no pads on yet. I mean, that's resulted in us really just talking more about rotations in the secondary as opposed to actual play. You know, there obviously has been play in coverages and all like that we've talked on, but I mean, the safeties come a factor more into this thing once the pads go on, and then once again, obviously, Russell Wilson hasn't even practiced fully yet, so it's hard to. It seems to me that it's hard to push a narrative that, Justin Fields can really win this when, we haven't even gotten to the meat and potatoes of this thing yet.
Yeah, I think the angle is Fields is impressing. And so, could that make this a battle? And I think Fields has impressed in moments, but I just haven't seen enough consistency that tells me he's a significantly different quarterback. And it'd be unreasonable to expect him to be radically different 4 practices in and being with the team through OTAs. Compared to what he was in Chicago. So it's not to really say an alarm on Fields. It's just to say that he's the guy that he's been, and that could change, but it's going to take some time.
Look, we could get by after Friday Night Lights, and if Russell Wilson practices as much as we hope that he's going to practice, maybe you have a different opinion next Monday, right?
It's possible, but I really think, I'm trying to envision this scenario in which Wilson is healthy, and I'm thinking about the quarterback, quote unquote, battle differently. It would have to be so bad for Wilson and so good for Fields to even, I think, really open that door. I think Pittsburgh wants to lean on Wilson's experience and veteran leadership and been there, done that for a pretty young offense and a new offense in many regards, Wilson included overall. And so that's why they really want to let him be the guy. And of course, we've talked about all offseason, Wilson has been the mayor of Pittsburgh, as you've said, and he's really, led this team and done everything that the starting quarterback does. And so those are all the intangible signs that he's going to be the guy. Again, I think really just barring injury that would make him unavailable for week 1.
What's the best throw Justin Fields has made so far?
I think the slot fade to Freiermuth. We've seen the one to Van Jefferson, and it was a pretty deep ball, but Dante Jackson fell, and it's 7-on-7, and so that one is a little less impressive from that standpoint. There was the good deep ball to Pickens as well, but I think the placement and the touch he showed Fields did on the throw to Freiermuth was his best throw so far.
And it does seem, I obviously don't go out there. You go out there more, but are you seeing more slot? It seems like.
Yeah, that's a good point.
More slot fades, at least in what's surfacing, and what I'm reading. Is that an overreaction, or does it indeed seem like there are more slot fades?
No, it's a good point. I really hadn't even thought about that, but it's been in my notes a ton. There's been many instances of that. So did Arthur Smith call you and ask for your input in this playbook? Because you love the slot fade.
Yeah, absolutely, I do. But it's just one of the things that I have kind of picked up. Mm-hmm. And once again, and look, you're not sitting there as detailed as your hieroglyphics are. You're not sitting there writing down all the concepts, at least not yet. Not at least until we get you AI help out there or whatnot.
Right? Can we clone technology for my camp notes?
Right, but I do read what you write. And, I try to follow along and make notes and mental notes along the way of what at least I think is happening out there. So, I'm a big fan of the slot fade, so it'll be interesting, but it has stuck out that maybe there have been a little bit more of those. We'll see. Maybe it's just something for you to watch moving forward here.
Yeah, it's obviously hard to compare to past years, and sometimes, did they run a slot fade and the quarterback didn't throw it that play, without us actually being able to tape it, which we're not allowed to do, which I won't do. It's hard to really, chart some of those things. But from a target standpoint, you're right. I know that's been in my notes a ton this year. So we'll see if that carries over into preseason action.
All right. We covered the Fields versus Wilson narrative. And I think on Monday morning, you have, what was the title of the post? 5 players, what?
5 standout Steelers through the first 4 days of training camp. Again, all the caveats of they're not in pads, evaluation really ramps up for Tuesday. We know that for the trench guys, O-line, D-line, run game in general, it's really hard to evaluate them until the pads come on. So I don't have a whole lot of commentary for those guys. You asked about how Fautanu's doing and Frazier. I can tell you a little, but I really can't tell you a lot confidently. I think the team would echo that as well. But in terms of the guys that have caught my eye so far through the first 4 days, I'll go down the list here. Most of them defensively, but one offensive name on this list is Pat Freiermuth. Not a big shock to hear about him having a nice camp, but I say from the standpoint of he has just had a ton of targets. He's got 8 targets through the first 4 practices. 7 came in the first 2 days. Justin Fields has looked his way a ton. Obviously, we don't know how he's working with Russell Wilson because Wilson has not been on the field yet, but Freiermuth, number 2 receiver de facto in this offense, a tight end heavy and friendly system that Arthur Smith is going to run. Freiermuth has seen a lot of action so far.
Good. That's just what we want to hear, especially with the state of the wide receiver depth chart at this point. We have talked all offseason about expecting Pat Freiermuth to possibly end this season with the second most amount of receptions on the team. This is a guy in Pat Freiermuth that we all, or most of us, expect him to sign a nice contract extension between now and, did you know there's 41 days left before week 1 game against the Falcons. So somewhere within there, we expect him to sign an extension. So that's good news. And looked like he had a nice catch along the sideline there in Sunday's practice and was able to get a couple of feet down.
Yeah, that came in 7-on-7, but it was a corner route. Ball was a little high. I think it needed to be high over the defender's head. He tipped it up twice, Freiermuth did, and then came down with it. He caught it in the sense of the ball didn't hit the ground. The ref that was there ruled him out of bounds. Yeah, I thought it was a catch. It would have been a good booth review if we had that technology at St. Vincent College, but that was also an impressive play. Okay. So while it's been a little bit quieter in the team period the last 2 days for Freiermuth and some of those 7-on-7 sessions, he's also been making plays.
All right, DeMarvin Leal, for those that have been listening to the special edition of the podcast after practices, a name that we've talked quite a bit about during those shows, and a guy that going into training camp, we said, look, this guy's got to have a great summer here because he's not feels like if this team winds up only carrying 6 defensive linemen on their 53-man roster, he's not, at least in our opinion, didn't feel like he's a given to be one of those spots, despite obviously being a former, 3rd-round draft pick and having 2 years under his belt at this point. So it's good that DeMarvin Leal is on your list.
Yeah, ditto. I mean, it's been needed to get some encouraging signs from DeMarvin Leal. He's explosive. He's gotten off of blocks. He's batted balls down the line of scrimmage. He's gotten in the backfield. Guys have had to hold him to try to prevent him from winning the block and making the play. So want to see it when the pads come on, obviously, and there's still going to be a ways to go for him. But Dave, how huge would it be if DeMarvin Leal becomes something what he was supposed to be for this team as a 3rd-round pick? If he can be, quality rotational depth and work in sub packages and play some defensive end, that would be just monumental for the state of the team's D-line.
It almost would feel like you got an extra pick in 2020, even though he's a former pick, and you were hoping to see more of him at this point, because he's become such a guy that you talk about, and probably we will for the rest of this training camp and preseason. Is he inside the bubble? Is he outside the bubble? Kind of guy. You have more questions about him than you do answers at this point. So it really would feel like, hey, they got an extra pick, and he's coming on like gangbusters in 2024. So yeah, that would be huge to get him, reaching that potential and starting to live up to his draft pedigree there.
And not just for this year, but the future as well, where Ogunjobi, his status a little uncertain, a roster bonus due for 2025 in March, and he's got to have a good year to earn that. And of course, Cam Hayward, 35 right now, entering the last year of his contract, and not 100% sure what the future will be for him. So to have some youth behind. I mean, you have a guy like Benton, but you need more people, and Benton's going to be a primary nose tackle in Pittsburgh's base 3-4. So to have an end and another pass rusher, I mean, if you can have, basically a 4-man pass rush group of Hayward, Benton, Ogunjobi, hopefully, and Leal, then you're really looking good there. And if you can get just, competent run defense from guys like Dean Lowry and Isaiah Loudermilk, guys that I think are capable of doing that, even though they're going to offer minimal as a pass rusher. But if those guys can do their job in that regard, then you're pretty set there as well. So overall, happy with the start, just a start, but good for DeMarvin Leal.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin's done a good job of kind of at least, giving him his flowers, but tamping it down as well, too, saying, look, we don't even have the pads on yet. But at this point, I mean, when we get into the preseason games, you would think that Cameron Hayward's probably not going to have to play a lot during the preseason, and probably the same with Larry Ogunjobi. So, you're going to probably see DeMarvin. Maybe that's the guy that logs the most amount of snaps on it. Didn't we talk a couple of shows ago about who were some of these guys on this roster on either side of the football that are likely to log the most amount of snaps during the preseason game? Maybe he's a guy that's going to end up with I don't know. Let's see, 65 times 3, that's 130. That's like almost 200 snaps in preseason. Might DeMarvin Leal play 80 of them? Yeah, maybe, or at least maybe the equivalent of a full game, 60 something.
Sign me up. I think he should. I mean, they're going to rotate, defensive linemen a fair bit. They got a bunch of them, but he's a guy that should get every snap that his body and his conditioning is able to take. I want to learn as much as I can about Leal because this is make or break for him, because you do have a lot of spoken for spots along the D line. You're kind of fighting for maybe 1 or 2 open, spots on this 53-man roster in that D line room. So you got to learn all you can about Leal right now, because there's not much time to wait and learn more later about his game.
Let's see. You would think he's going to, if he stays healthy and able to suit up for all 3 games, he's going to get, if I set the over under it, 80 is a good number.
I'd have to look at some of the preseason charting from past years, but I think short answer.
Is that a large croissant they're showing on the on the Today Show this morning? They're eating.
I don't have it on right now.
Holy moly!
You tell me.
I'm sorry, but I'm sorry to interrupt.
Got a squirrel moment today.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt the show here, but that looks like I don't have the sound up. It looks like a big ass croissant right there, and I have not eaten this morning either, so that looks good. All right, I'm sorry. Carry on.
To segue back into DeMarvin Leal, yeah, I think 80, around there is probably a healthy number to look at for him. But the more snaps he can do, the better.
Agreed. All right, the next guy on the list, we talked a little about him through the first couple of shows of the special edition of the podcast. When I saw the title of this post and then clicked on it this morning, I did not expect to see the name of Kyron Johnson on there.
Yeah, I mean, he wouldn't have been on my list before training camp had you told me, Alex, here's going to be your 5 standout names in your article after the first 4 days. I would not have assumed that Johnson would be on there, but I wanted to have a list. I mean, A, it's warranted, it's deserved, and then B, I didn't want to put just starters in all the household names. I wanted some guys that were maybe back end of the roster not being discussed as much, and I think Johnson has been one of the more impressive overall players in that team period. Now, again, want to see him when the run game becomes live, we get some of the real good looks in 1v1, O-line, D-line, edge versus offensive tackles to really see those guys work and battle and compete. I'll get a cleaner evaluation then, but I've seen Johnson set the edge well in the run game, show a quick first step as a pass rusher, beating some of the competition. Yes, it's generally been third string lineman, Anderson Hardy. It's not exactly Broderick Jones he's matching up against, but all you can do is beat the man that you're, has to face off against, and Johnson consistently has. So he's gotten praise from coaches. As we mentioned, he's not new to the Steelers, was on the roster the back half of last year. The build is a concern, still a slight, smaller, undersized guy overall, still running behind Jeremiah Moon. But I think Johnson has brought a really well-rounded performance so far.
What's his signature, maybe as an edge guy, coming off move, maybe?
I'll get a better feel watching the reps more consistently in O-line, D-line, but really speed, because he's not going to be a power guy. He's slight, undersized. I don't know exactly where he is lengthwise, but not it's not a big guy. His calling card seems to be probably a dip or just a speed rush to the outside.
All right, and I circle back to what I wrote about him on the 90 and 30 series, which, by the way, when I finally got to those three, Jenkins, Kyron Johnson, and Cameron Johnson, was July 3rd, so almost a month since that post went up. I wrote, when looking at the Steelers' offseason roster, Johnson is a bit of a forgotten player. The fact that the Steelers thought enough of him to dress him in so many games last season speaks volumes overall, even though he was mainly just used on special teams. So obviously, too, we talk about that fourth. You would still obviously have Jeremiah Moon ahead of him. He's running ahead of him. I think you said in the last special edition podcast, in the groups and all like that. And, he would have to be a special teams asset undeniably to make this 53-man roster. But if there was a fifth outside linebacker at this point, it feels like it's him, right?
I would agree. And, right now, yes, Moon is ahead. If I was making my 53-man roster today, I would still have Moon ahead of Johnson, but that is not etched in stone. If Moon doesn't have a great preseason, if he's not able to generate much pressure, if the pass rush technique isn't coming along, he's not showing more there, and Johnson continues to shine, that could shift. I don't know exactly how likely that is, but it's certainly plausible and possible. So I think at worst, Johnson setting himself up to remain on the practice squad with how his play has gone so far and being kind of a known commodity the back half of last year. So we'll keep watching, but yeah, Johnson is not going to let Moon just have a layup for this spot. I'll put it that way.
All right. The next name on this list, I fully expected to be on this list when I saw the title, and that's new cornerback Dante Jackson, and that's good news.
It is. He's gotten a lot of buzz from myself and others who have been there. He's been really competitive against George Pickens and just contesting the ball well, even breakups in 7 shots against Calvin Austin. Yesterday has the first and only interception of training camp off of Justin Fields in Sunday's practice. So just been happy with his steady play overall. Has he been beat a couple times? Yeah, but you're all going to get beat, especially in this environment that's so slanted overall for the offense, where the quarterback can't get hit and they can scramble and run around and you can't tackle these guys and all that kind of usual warnings and caveats there. But Jackson has shown, I think, a short-term memory, even after getting beat early in camp by Van Jefferson in 7-on-7 for a long play. He came back for the next rep and drove and broke on a slant and broke up the pass intended for Marquez Callaway. So, Porter's still giving number one corner on this team, obviously, and Porter's been fine, but Jackson has really caught my attention.
He's definitely going to be on the team, but it'd be interesting to see as we get further into this thing, especially when the pads go on and you get more of those one-on-one drills on the outside, and with the wide receivers, be interesting to track him continuing on. But it is good that you've got him on the list, a newcomer and a guy that's going to what we think is going to play a ton of snaps in 2024 for the Steelers. The next guy on the list is actually a tag team. It's 2 players, Peyton Wilson and Patrick Queen. And oh boy, it feels good to see both those guys on this list at this early stage.
You get 6 standouts on my list of 5, so I'm cheating here a little bit, but they're both warranted to have on this list, Wilson and Queen. Wilson has been really, as advertised, explosive, fluid. The team has really praised his maturity. Everyone loves he's the first guy down on the field almost every single practice to go through his pretty lengthy pre-practice routine. Had a forced fumble in yesterday's session against Pat Frymuth, finishing the play. The team always preaches ball search, rip the football out. And, I think the defense in general has shown that, but Wilson on that particular rep obviously got the job done there. He's been just really quick. In some of those zone drops, his ability to drive and plant and make a play on the football or get close and squeeze those windows that might be more open normally for quarterbacks has been evident to me. And then Patrick Queen, not talked about as much, probably because you expect him to do well, and Wilson has generated some buzz, but Queen has been just so lightning quick to the flat, just great stops on Frymuth, on Jalen Warren. The communication overall has seemed crisp and clean for, Queen being in that lead role so far. So, Queen has been also, like Wilson, as advertised.
All right. Walk me through your honorable mention list, a blurb on each here. But note you've got TJ Watt on here. Leave him off because we all know not a good enough pass rush win rate for him. So,
right.
But talk about Kyle Allen, Roman Wilson, Darius Rush, Beanie Bishop Jr., and Nate Herbig for the Peoples.
I think Allen has been consistent at quarterback, working more short intermediate game, but he's shown good touch and layered the football well and just been clean and efficient. So I want to give him a shout out on there. Roman Wilson, was quiet more Sunday, quiet the first day of camp. The middle 2 days were his strongest, but he's been able to get some elevated reps with, I believe, Van Jefferson missing Sunday's practice that gave more time for Roman Wilson out there, and had a really good catch on Saturday on another slot fade over Beanie Bishop, coming back for the football, finding it, high pointing it, getting his feet in bounds. So he's making some plays and coming on stronger. Darius Rush also has come on strong. He had 2 breakups, I think, in Saturday's practice, and 1 in 7-on-7 yesterday. So he's a guy that's running second team, getting a ton of snaps, competitive, using his length, using his size, and looking athletic overall. Beanie Bishop Jr., really getting almost all the first team slot reps throughout camp. And I thought there'd be more of a rotation. There has been some guys that have mixed in, Deshaun Elliott, and of course, Graylin Arnold, Josiah Scott have worked more second, third team slot corners. So they're getting reps, but Bishop, I think Pittsburgh really wants to get a long look at him, and he's overall responded. Nate Herbig, throw a different name in there. Again, tough to evaluate the trenches, but his snaps have been clean, which has been an issue for some other guys. And, he's run first team every single opportunity so far. So, still could easily see Zach Frazier be this team's week 1 center, but I want to shout out Herbig for being consistent and just, right now running first team center. So we'll see if that continues, but I think Herbig has looked pretty good.
All right. I enjoyed that read. Good job on that.
Thank you. Anything else here? Any other camp headlines that I'm missing that maybe we should talk about? Sometimes I'm just so in my own notes, I'm not maybe seeing some of the storylines that are being created, at least on Twitter.
Talk quickly about, how much did you mention Van Jefferson in the opening, and going to keep your eye out for him on Tuesday?
Yeah, I didn't see him Sunday. Mike Tomlin did not mention his name, but I have no recollection of seeing him in the individual where all the receivers are going, 1 by 1 or 2 by 2 through drills. Nothing in my notes about him. Scotty Miller was getting more first team reps where Jefferson had been working. So I don't know if that was something going on personal or some sort of small injury or whatever the case is. We'll check back on Tuesday, but he's been running primarily first team, made a couple plays. He's looked fluid and, had that big 7-on-7 catch I mentioned earlier, but we'll just see if he gets back on Tuesday.
All right. I guess really the other narratives to come out of the first 4 days would be mental errors on the offensive side of football is the first thing that's in my head. And the second that still sticks out to me is a tweet from you, I think yesterday, saying this team's going to run a lot of running back screens.
Yeah, seen running back screens consistently. They work them in warmups, and of course, what they work on in warmups are things they're going to practice in team throughout that day. So it's translated over. I'll have to count the number of running back screens, but it's been probably at least a half dozen through the first 4 practices. And sometimes you're in run session where you're not even really have a situation to throw a lot of screens. So it's been a pretty heavy concentration of those overall. 2 mixed results, but I think they've generally looked pretty clean, and the blockers have been out in space, and they've not been always been blown up. Even sometimes they'll get not true running back screens where linemen are pulling, but they'll run kind of these swing screens where a tight end or a fullback will go out in space and they'll just run a little swing route in the flat to the running back and kind of a extension of the run game in that sense, which you maybe don't call that a screen. Maybe you do, but it functionally works in a very similar way. So that's definitely going to be, I think, a hallmark of this offense. But yeah, they've had a ton of sloppiness and mental issues and pre-snap penalties, unforced errors, so many false starts on Sunday's practice. But even before then, you had it throughout the week. Young guys like McCormick's had multiple penalties. Even Darnell Washington got flagged for a false start a couple days ago. And yesterday it was Fautanu, it was Fisher, it was Hardy, it was Tyler Beach in warmups, it was McCollum with a bad snap that caused him to run a lap. So you want to clean these things up. There's been too many just kind of dead plays or just dead moments because of pre-snap issues.
And I guess kind of a more minor narrative is what's up with Corey Trice Jr., even though he's back on the field and good for him. Nearly 1 full year since his knee injury in training camp practice. Why do you suppose maybe we're not talking about him as much?
The reps really just have not been there. He's been working third team. He opened third team, and really the last two practices, the weekend session, Saturday and Sunday, even getting third team reps felt difficult. I'm not charting who's out there every single rep, but I try to keep a really good eye. You guys see that in my notes. I'm usually pretty quick to note about, especially whenever teams rotate out. First team goes out, second team goes in. I'm trying to make notes of who's coming in. And Trice has kind of been splitting some of those third team reps with guys like Thomas Graham Jr. and Anthony Averett. Darius Rush and Kalen Barnes have consistently run ahead as the second team corners. And so it's not to say that Trice has been bad. I don't have anything in my notes that says that. It's just the reps have been hard to come by. Now, Matthew Marksey wrote today, is the team being maybe intentionally cautious with him and not putting too much on his plate as he works his way back? That's possible. I don't get that sense. He's out there doing everything. He's not being held out of any session. The knee brace is gone. He is basically almost literally 1 year removed from that torn ACL. He's been cleared. We'll see if he's out there for the contact periods. If he's not, then maybe that does suggest something to Matthew's thought about this team being cautious. But just my takeaway from Trice is I've not seen much of him in a literal sense. The reps have just simply not been there.
All right, and one final thought here that just crossed my mind. What are your overarching thoughts on this wide receiver group 4 days in after 4 unpadded practices versus to maybe a built-up narrative that you had in your head coming into training camp? Has it really changed in any?
It really has not changed much. It's like when you go to the eye doctor and they tell you it's 1 or 2 better and one is like slightly better. Maybe it's a little bit of that, a little bit of more clarity where it feels like your starters right now are, of course, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, and Van Jefferson, with maybe Scotty Miller, Roman Wilson right behind and trying to push. I mean, the guys have made plays. Miller's made some plays. Quez Watkins had a really nice catch and 7 shots on Sunday. Jefferson looked good early on. Austin's had a couple of moments as well, but it's really still been, pretty jumbled up. And this will be an ongoing, I think, evaluation, not just throughout the first 4 days, not just throughout camp, but the entire summer until cut downs and if this team makes an outside acquisition. So my thoughts have really not changed a whole lot. It's still a pretty messy, jumbled up battle.
All right. Thank you for that. All right. I think as far as training camp goes, we've got, I think that's kind of a healthy recap there, right?
Yeah, and everyone can listen to our daily special edition episodes. It'll happen every day, except we will not do one after the Friday night lights practice this upcoming Friday because it is going to occur so late. So just a heads up there.
And also because I'm going to put a governor on Alex Kozora's Porsche so that he can only do like 25 miles an hour on the way home that night so he don't hit any deer.
Yeah. Thank Dave for jinxing me. He messaged me before I left camp yesterday and said, watch out for the deer. I literally, on 2 separate occasions, almost hit deer on the way back, including one buck that was probably bigger than my car and certainly bigger than me. So very scary moment there, but we're good to go.
All right. Where to from now? You want to talk about some cash?
Let's just one other just quick note, training camp related around the NFL, and I kind of missed the news halfway through. You can probably speak to it better than I can, but Sam Williams of the Dallas Cowboys, torn ACL, apparently out for the season. It's a big blow for the Cowboys pass rush.
That is a big blow for them, and the Steelers play them, I believe, week 5 of this season. Now, obviously, look, between now and the season getting underway, there's going to be a lot of unfortunate injuries around the NFL. Hopefully the Steelers don't have any or don't have a large share of them that are impactful. But, this is something obviously we monitor, especially for teams that the Steelers will play this upcoming season. So it is notable that they have lost a very good pass rusher in Sam Williams. And, man, they've got a lot going on in Dallas right now, especially after some of these quarterbacks getting paid. Who got paid? Jordan Love got paid. Who else got paid?
Tua
got paid. Now all eyes are back on. Really, the focus goes back, I think, on the Cowboys because they got several guys over there with their hands out, right? Parsons, Dak Prescott, and CeeDee Lamb at this point. They are very, very low. In fact, the Cowboys, I think, might be last right now in the NFL as far as cash spending for 2024 to date. It feels like there's deals coming for maybe all three or all three players there, but most notably, look, I mean, it's rightful until it's not rightful to maybe speculate about what might happen with Dak Prescott if they don't get him signed to a deal this offseason, meaning, could this be a guy that potentially is in play for the Steelers to go shopping for next offseason? I suppose that's plausible until it's not, right? So, but my gut tells me they're going to get something done with Dak Prescott. But I mean, circling this back to the Cowboys, they lost a pass rusher in Sam Williams, and this is a team that the Steelers will play week 5 of the season.
And just another quick note, sounds like Kirk Cousins feeling pretty good about his rehab and recovery down there in Atlanta. So fully expecting Kirk Cousins to be the starting quarterback week 1 when Pittsburgh opens up their season. To take your conversation and the Cowboys conversation back to the cash and just salary cap standpoint, on Dak, if you had to guess, will he touch $60 million per year on a new deal whenever that gets signed, whoever that is signed with? The top of the market right now is $55 million. That's Love. Who else is there? Did Lawrence or Burrow or somebody get $55 million per year? But that's the top of the market. The question is, who's the first to touch 60, and will it be Prescott?
I'm not so sure he'd touch, and that, I don't know obviously what the conversations are like, but you've got 3 guys that I think you got the Burrow at $55 million, you got Jordan Love at $55 million, you got Trevor Lawrence at $55 million, and Tua, I think his official number is $53.1 million. Now the cash flows are all different. We could spend a whole podcast going over the cash flows of these things. Short answer, I don't expect Dak to hit 60, but I would imagine he's trying to top that 55 million mark.
Okay. If you had to guess what number he'll come in at, I agree. I don't think he'll touch 60. I think we'll get close. I think it'll be maybe like 58 and a half or something like that is my guess on
just to make it fun, I'll take under 58 and a half.
Okay. But above 55. Certainly, right?
Right.
Gotcha. All right. Where did you want to go on the cash discussion? I don't know what rabbit hole to go down, but lead me away.
Yeah, just obviously not a popular discussion overall, but I think it's something to continue to monitor here with the 42 days left or 41 days before the Steelers start the regular season. By my current estimations, when looking at the Steelers' top 53 players under contract, in addition to any player outside of that 53 that has been given a guaranteed cash amount, which really is just the whatever draft picks did not make the top 53 and the undrafted guys, along with the projected practice squad amounts and all like that. I have the Steelers currently, and this is obviously going to change because not everybody in the top 53 as far as projected cash spends at this point are probably going to make the 53-man roster. So there will be offset from guys not in the 53 making the 53, but long story short, I've got them around $208 million in projected cash spend when it comes to 2024 right now. On top of that, when you look at going back to 2021, which was the first year of that 3-year CBA period, the Steelers spent 88.6 of the league's cap number that year in cash. So to get to that same percentage, and look, this is a guessing game here as far as what, a year 1 cash spend total will be for the Steelers. But if their goal was to get to 88.6% of this year's cap number being spent in cash, that same percentage this year, they would have to spend roughly another $18.3 million more in cash in the next basically 42 days, because we know this team doesn't really do anything after the start of the regular season as far as extending players go. So this goes back to kind of a post I wrote several weeks ago about how I thought that there would still be about $20 million spent by this team in cash moving forward. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and you are not convinced that this team will sign Pat Freiermuth to a contract extension in the next 42 days, you have your right to your opinion there. I will be shocked if they do not sign Pat Freiermuth to a contract extension. And Alex, I would imagine you're in that boat as well, right?
Yeah, I become more and more convinced. I was pretty sure before, maybe a little less confident than you in the offseason, just because I wondered if the injuries last year, the dip in production was going to make the deal a little bit trickier. But I mean, when was the last time Pittsburgh went an entire offseason without doing any extension? It feels like they at least get somebody done each year, and Freiermuth is certainly the most logical name.
Right. And what will that look like for him as far as additional cash goes? Probably around, I'm guessing around $13 or $14 million in additional cash when it comes to that. So if we're speculating that this team will spend roughly at least another $18.3 million more in cash in the next 42 days, and if Freiermuth, let's say, winds up being $13 million more of that, there's still an overhang there of and look, there's no, they could obviously spend up to 20. I mean, there's no limits as far as the cash that they could technically spend moving forward here. But I would count on that at least being part of that. Now, the other question goes is really how many players in reality are looking at contract extensions this offseason. Freiermuth's obviously one of them. Cameron Hayward's obviously another one. But even if they get Cameron Hayward done to an extension, with him already being on the books for $16 million in cash anyway, if they were to do a no new money extension with him for 2024, talking about new money there, well, then you're not going to move the needle there. The only other, unless you can come up with another player for me, the only other conversation to have is a potential deal for Najee Harris that we've gone back and forth with quite a bit this offseason. Is there any and we've already kind of got it outlined by Omar Khan that nothing's going to happen with Justin Fields or Russell Wilson this offseason. There really are no other candidates, legitimate candidates, for a contract extension this offseason here. So if they're going to get to the $20 million additional cash spend between now and the start of the regular season, and if Cameron Hayward's not given new money in 2024 above the $16 million, that only leaves the two people to get it from in Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris there. Here, the other narrative to go along kind of with this as a big picture view here is just the cash spending overall as a team. We just talked about the Dallas Cowboys. Why isn't this loading here? Hold on a minute here. Let me see if I can get this to load.
And just quickly, as you do that, I know we're focusing on extensions, but the other way they could increase their cash is if they were to trade for somebody or bring in somebody from the outside, which is unknown, but a possibility.
Right. If you go out and get obviously a big name wide receiver, that's going to shift your cash spending as well too. And especially if you go out and get a guy like Ayuk and you turn around and give him a big fat deal, that would significantly increase the cash spending for this year. Looking at things right now, this is after Over the Cap has processed the Jordan Love contract and the Packers were down there in the bottom 3 in projected cash spending for this year. Before that, now as a result of that quarterback deal, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8th in the league. So that lets you know the impact of these quarterback deals and the cash spending and the signing bonuses. And because he got like, what was it, $75 million signing bonus Jordan Love did. And I think all that's to be paid out by December of 2024. So that just shows you the impact. Not that you didn't know it already, but what that quarterback deal does to teams in cash spending. At this point, according to Over the Cap, and look, they look at the entire roster under contract. They don't project out 53-man rosters. They're just giving you the running cash total of what teams are projected to spend at this point if they were to carry their full 90 or 91, or depending on how many players they might have on IR at this point here. But the Cowboys are last in the league. At this point, obviously, if they got a deal done with anybody, Dak, CD Lamb, Micah Parsons, they are going to jump out of that last place spot. Then the Rams are next, and the Rams just did an adjustment, I think, on Stafford on his contract. It'll be interesting. I don't follow the Rams close enough to think to know whether or not maybe there might be a significant move on their part moving forward in the next 40 something days. And then next, third lowest spending in the NFL when it comes to complete rosters for 2024 when it comes to cash is the Steelers. Now, that obviously needs explanation. You got a full quarter. You got 4 quarterbacks under contract right now that are barely eating up what $6 million, I think, in total there as far as cash spend goes there. So there is a little bit of explanation in there. But then there on the flip side is that even once you get beyond that is surely they're not going to go in. Will they start the season as a bottom 2 cash spending team for 2024? And if you get, fast forwarding into the end of the season, if you get to a point where this team still hasn't won a playoff game, it'll be easy to point the narrative back to, well, they were one of the lowest cash spending teams in the NFL. And once again, there are no strong correlations between cash and winning, as a whole. There's been studies done on that. You can win and not spend a lot of cash in a given season. Now, over a 3-year span, you would think that the cash would catch up to a team. But make no mistake about it. If the Steelers stay bottom 2 or 3 or 4 in cash spending in 2024, and this team does not win a playoff game, there will be talk about, well, look at the cash that they spent.
Sure. And the question is, could they have been more aggressive in free agency? They had a hot start, signed a bunch of guys early, Patrick Queen, the most notable, and then things kind of got quiet from there. I mean, what is the takeaway, I guess, besides that, in terms of, does this make a Najee Harris extension more likely because of I don't want to say need, but the likelihood or the history of this team being at a certain percentage, in terms of first year cash spending, to be on track to be at 90% over 3 years? I mean, what is kind of the interpretation we should be taking from all this?
The math is mathing as far as the mathing of the math goes.
Okay, well, you cleared that up.
In other words, it's there to get done. Now, once again, look, and I put this out on Twitter a couple days ago there. If you're a betting man for obvious reasons for what has happened with Najee Harris so far, not picking up the 5th-year option, yada, yada, you're going to bet that the Steelers don't get an extension done with him this offseason. But all the math is there, at least unless they go out and trade for another player of significant cash value. And once again, projecting year one cash spend in a CBA cycle is extremely hard to do because you just don't know where the team's head is. It's a lot easier in year three because you know that the team has got to spend X amount to hit the 90% floor, right? For the 3-year span here. But all I'm saying, and it's what I've said for several weeks now, don't come running to us saying I am shocked that this team, or don't have a shock reaction if they do extend Najee Harris, because the math says it's very plausible.
Can I put you on the spot here?
Sure.
I know you think it's plausible a Harris extension happens. What are you betting on? If you had to guess, yes or no?
Well, look, I tried to pin down William Hill Sports betting about a week and a half ago of what kind of odds could I get on Najee Harris signing the extension, and they said they don't have anything on the, they're not willing to do that just yet. So if I could get long odds on that, I mean, I would put some money on that.
But even taking the odds out of it, just if somebody asked you, let's say you go on Dave Weekly Show Tuesday, do you believe an extension will get done with Najee Harris before week one? What would your answer be?
My gut tells me, and it's just a gut feeling that I've had for several weeks now, is that they will.
Okay. And that's the math, not even your gut. That's the math supporting.
And also, and I've said this a few times throughout this offseason, and particularly since they did not pick up the 5th-year option on him, it really feels criminal to ask Najee to play for $2.39 million in 2024 based on what he's done so far. It feels like the Steelers always do the right thing. I mean, especially when it comes to money and situations such as this. Other than now, look, the Steelers could, and we don't know what's going on behind doors. Maybe they presented a contract that, like I laid out several weeks ago, and obviously that does not have any guaranteed money past 2024 in it. And if he just flat out turns it down, well, then they tried, know. Sure. And they tried within the parameters that you would expect the Steelers to try when it comes to a situation such as this. Now, if they throw that out there in a good faith, a good shot, at this contract, and it's all along the parameters and the average yearly value and the cash flows that we would expect this deal to be, and his side just flat out says no, well then there you go. They tried, but if you're Najee's side and you're looking at this and you're looking at, man, I got to do this one more year before I get paid, and the wear and tear, and I've stayed, you got to look hard and long at maybe taking such a deal from the Steelers. But I mean, this all boils back to kind of my gut feeling, and it's several factors here. It's the cash spend as the team at this point, and it's just looking at this at the standpoint of, man, look at the running back market right now. You know how unhappy Najee is with this, and to look at, and people will say, well, he should be expected to play out his contract. It feels criminal to ask him to play for $2.439 million this year.
Sure, it's under his worth. I don't think anybody should debate that, but doesn't obviously guarantee an extension happen. So your yes to Freiermuth, your yes, if you had to guess, on Harris, and your yes on Hayward before week 1 too.
Yeah, and I know Ray Filippato just said something on a radio interview. I didn't read the full thing, that he thinks that this thing with Cam Hayward will be more next year.
Mm-hmm. Is that likely? I was going to ask you about doing it, letting the year play out, and then before free agency next year.
I mean, it's certainly plausible to happen that way, but okay. I feel that both sides want to get this thing done. I think it's just a matter of Cameron Hayward's side agreeing to there being no new money in 2024 and there being no guarantees, full money guarantees past this year.
How would you present to Cam the incentive to take that deal with no guarantees, no new money?
Look, if you think you can play these next 2 years, we'll sign up for them. But on the flip side, we have to be cognizant of the guaranteed money moving forward here because of your age and all like that. I mean, we'll gladly pay you the money if we think you can pay, but we have to be careful with the guarantees here. And we'll put roster bonuses in there for March in 2025 and 2026. So that way, if we do have, it creates triggers. That way you would be allowed to hit the market early. Yada yada here, but I think the conversation would be, Cam, look, we just have to be careful with the guaranteed money here, and hopefully you understand that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So I think Freiermuth gets done. I think Hayward, they'll figure something out before week 1. I'll still be in the no camp on Najee, but I get your points, and maybe that means if not Najee, they will make an outside move.
Look, here's recap of kind of what we just said here. I expect this team to spend more cash in the next 42 days or 41 days. I keep losing track here. 41 days. And I'm convinced a chunk of that will be Pat Freiermuth. There is a lot of room to spend 25 million more if they really wanted to, and nothing prevents this team from going out still and trading for an Ayuk. And even though as historically unplausible as that seems, them doing such an act, they could still make it happen. From a cash and a cap perspective, this team is in good shape to do anything that they want to do at this point of the offseason.
And Omar Khan talked about we don't usually have this kind of salary cap space, which is true. And it's for a variety of reasons. Not spending hardly anything on quarterback helps. But remember, the cap was not supposed to be this high. Back when the cap was set, we thought it was going to be like 244 million. It came in 10 million plus above that figure. And so that just gave relief to everybody and additional money for Pittsburgh to work with.
I am very intrigued to see how these next 40 something days work out. Not only from a cash spending standpoint, because I've dedicated a lot of this offseason to try to judge that in the first year of the CBA. And then also because the scope is obviously at this point so narrow as far as who the potential player, and it's usually easy to figure out at this time, right? Of who may or may not get an extension. It's not really that it's hard to build that list. But on top of it too, we've seen in the first couple of years with Omar Khan, he's normally gotten these bigger deals done out of the way early in the summer, as opposed to it feels like these are going to be later in the summer. And a lot of we might be having this same conversation, God help the listeners, heading into the final preseason game.
Possibly, at least maybe with one of them. Maybe they get a Freiermuth done, and then the conversation shifts towards Hayward, and Harris will loom. So we'll let you know. We'll keep you posted. But all three guys, Harris, Freiermuth, Hayward, working in full, not holding in. We'll see when the contact happens, if any of that changes, how they'll handle Najee Harris. Probably going to be pretty careful with him. Hayward won't get some rest days here. Freiermuth will probably be a full go the whole way through, but that's the status on them right now.
Right. Okay, what else do we have to get to? Anything?
Last thing is the Hall of Honor that got announced on Saturday. Pittsburgh always announces their upcoming class during training camp. Usually have somebody on the field at St. Vincent that day to kind of be welcome, do some interviews. And so the 4 names for the Hall of Honor of 2024, all well-deserving, are running back Willie Parker, outside linebacker Jason Gilden, nose tackle Casey Hampton, and defensive coordinator and Hall of Famer, the great Dick LeBeau. So a very deserving group of 4. Gilden was on hand for practice. Mike Tomlin introduced him to the crowd. He did some media interviews, and so that was really cool overall. Gilden, kind of a forgotten name of Steelers outside linebacker pass rushers, was the sack leader for quite a bit of time in franchise history. So with him, with Hampton, the run-stuffing nose tackle, fast Willie Parker, then of course LeBeau, who we've talked about quite a bit with his book that just came out. So really good class.
Yeah, what a set of four names there, and man, we've just blessed to have been able to talk to Dick LeBeau a couple of times over the course of the last calendar year here. That's been fun. He obviously belongs there. Willie Parker, I can't help but thinking back to his rookie year and what was it, that final, what was it, preseason game against the Buffalo Bills where he really made his mark at, and he had, there've been a lot written about him in camp leading into that year. Obviously undrafted out of North Carolina. He put the fungibility in fungibility when it comes to running backs there. And then Casey Hampton, well, everything's already been said. It probably needs to be said about him. It's just too bad that you don't have metrics and advanced stats when it comes to two gapping and the impact that position played for a guy like Casey Hampton and what he was able to do up front in that defense. And then, Gilden, obviously, as you mentioned there, was the sack leader for numerous years there with the Steelers on top of it. It was fun to go back and look at a couple of clips from his first sack, which was Dan Marino, and the sack that ended up breaking or setting the sack record at the time was against the Cardinals and Jeff Blake. And he had 3 sacks in that game against the Cardinals, and all 3 of them came in the second half of that game as well too. So he punctuated breaking that sack record, the Steelers sack record in that game.
Yeah, to break L.C. Greenwood's mark, and Joe Green was right behind them, so to have more sacks than those guys is pretty legendary, and he held that number 1 spot until it was James Harrison that broke that, which has now of course been rebroken by TJ Watt. But yeah, deserving for Hampton. Those Steelers defenses were so, as much as Blitzburg was talked about and the outside linebackers, and Troy, and all well-deserved, but it all started with stopping the run. If Pittsburgh did not stop the run, they would not have had the success to dial up the fire zones and all the exotic, chaotic looks on 3rd and long that they were ultimately able to do. And so it started with the run, and that starts with the man in the middle, and that starts with Casey Hampton. And so good to see him get his flowers. We know he's never going to be in the Hall of Fame, even though he was an elite nose tackle, but for him to get recognized by Pittsburgh forever is really special. And then, yeah, Willie Parker, just not many guys like Willie Parker with that story. A small guy, but was able to shoulder the load for a time. And yeah, I think I was listening to them, Art Rooney and all of them, talk about inducting the class or selecting the class. And I mean, Parker was like the 3rd string running back on a bad North Carolina team. I mean, just for him to go from that to becoming a Steelers starter and longest run in Super Bowl history, and just the asset that he was, is a really unique and fun story overall. And then, of course, Dick LeBeau, what he means to Pittsburgh, what he means to the NFL in general, what his contributions are. And he's not being inducted for his playing days in Pittsburgh, but he was a tremendous cornerback with the Detroit Lions. And so they're just, I think it's really unique stories and special people in a great class.
I agree. All
right, Dave, want to get to some reader emails and close out today's show?
All right, we'll start from Matthew Suddeth here. George Pickens has been and continues to be a problem child, a cancer that destroys from within. Poor attitudes and lack of effort has plagued the wide receiver room far too long. Despite his obvious talent, the time has come to demonstrate this should be unacceptable behavior in Pittsburgh. Find a way to show him the exit door. I'd rather go with 3rd and 4th level wide receivers with team first attitudes and effort than these recent problem children. I know it's crazy to get rid of talent, but addition by subtraction frustrated one day into camp, he writes, i.e. Antonio Brown, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Martavius Bryant, George Pickens. Thanks for allowing me to vent. I'll be cheering when Pickens scores his first TD of the season. Yeah, that's a good way to end that one, Matt. And look, wide receivers are a different group, Zach Azzani, it's going to be interesting to watch that dynamic continue on throughout training camp. I don't suppose that this is the last time that we're talking about George Pickens this year getting frustrated or wearing his emotions on his sleeve and blowing up in the media, blowing up on this podcast. But I think you hit on a big part there at the end there. We'll all be cheering when Pickens makes those fantastic catches and blows by for hopefully more than a few 50-plus yard touchdowns, those kind of things. So it's a balance thing. And look, I realize you name a lot of wide receivers on here. I mean, Antonio Brown, those later years in the attitude, obviously, that's got what got him run out of Pittsburgh. Chase Claypool, was he ever really all that great?
I mean, it was a really good rookie season. It was impressive. 4 touchdown game against the Eagles. It was electric.
Dante Jackson, how will he be remembered in Pittsburgh?
Probably drops, even though some of that was unfair, some of it fair, but not all of it. I think the point was he was listing off kind of the history of malcontent receivers who seem to always, at some points, or always be unhappy.
And Martavis Bryant, it's just a shame that the rules of the NFL related to him. Did you ever really see him as a huge malcontent?
No, I think it was just the weed and getting suspended for that. Maybe even, I shouldn't say just focus on the malcontent, but like he's saying, there's always these Steelers receivers that have all these headlines for non-football things or for all the wrong reasons, and he's concerning that Pickens will go down that path again, as was often the case last year.
Look, I understand, the email from Matthew here, but I think he did end it in the right way as well too. Let's just hope this kind of dynamic between Azani and Pickens and all, those two understand each other a little bit more moving forward, because the guy is very talented on the field. And we've said that numerous times.
I guess the question that comes down to for receivers or any player is, does the good outweigh the bad? Is he worth the headache? Can you live with the negativity that pops up? And there's a line, and if the negativity becomes too much, even for players as great as AB, then, you're going to be gone. Of course, AB said he wanted out, but it was pretty much a no-brainer with that decision to part ways with Antonio Brown. And I think the Pickens, if he could, like you said, Dave, there's going to be things from time to time that come up, some sort of story. He posts a thing on Instagram, he gets mad on the sideline. That's going to happen. But can you limit those and mitigate them enough? And can he be talented enough on the field to make enough plays on the field that you can live with the occasional, storyline for the wrong reasons? I think that's possible with Pickens. I get why it's under the microscope because of what happened last year and just the general, belief that Pickens is immature and has to grow up, a young guy. And some of those things are probably fair. But I also, as I said, when this became a story the first 2 days of camp, I don't want to put under the microscope and so micromanage and blow up every single thing that happens on the sideline. Receivers get frustrated. Players, get frustrated with coaches sometimes. We knew that there will be friction between him and Azani because Azani is a very hard edge, tough love kind of a coach. And so I expect those things to happen. They can be healthy. You can work through them. Let's see if he does. So I'm willing to keep that optimism that Pickens will grow and get better and be a better player for the tough love and the hard coaching that Azani brings. And I don't want to, it can be so easy to sit there and say, oh my God, look at this thing George Pickens did. Look how mad he got. I don't want to play that song every single time. When it's warranted, sure. When something huge happens, of course. But it's football, and sometimes guys get mad, and that's okay.
All right. Michael Rocket's got an email along the similar line, so I'm not going to read the whole thing here. But in closing, he says, in short, I hope both George and Zach learn how to work positively together in order to bring out the best in George. He says, as Alex watches camp practices, I'm curious to hear if you think they are building a relationship or getting further apart in a relationship.
I really can't. I wish I had the insight to be able to judge that from the bleachers, and, I'll see some of their interactions, but it's going to be just little moments in time. And really their relationship is going to be built more than just through 2 hours in practice. It's through, in these camp environments, maybe some, post-camp settings in the cafeteria and in the meeting room, some one-on-one time. There's going to be tough love, and they're going to coach these guys hard. And that's the point of practice. And that's good. I think Pittsburgh needs that for a young and overall unproven receiver room, but being able to gauge their relationship, are they closer apart, or are they stronger? I'm not going to be able to really offer that. It's a good question. It's a valid question. Again, I would just say that you're going to get some friction probably in the early going with Pickens, maybe other receivers as well, but it's all part of the process. You work through that. And I think as Ani's talked about that, over time, guys will come to appreciate and respect that and say down the road, man, I'm so glad that he coached me hard and brought the best out in me. As Ani was in college for a number of years. And so you're taking 17-year-olds, and they're probably friction there to begin with. And guys leave and say, man, I'm so glad that he coached me the way that he coached me. So I'm optimistic that there can be a lot of good that comes out of this, and they'll have a really good relationship, and Pickens will be thankful for this ultimately. But I can't tell, especially 4 days in the camp, about the status of their relationship.
All right. Bryce, we'll end this one from Bryce. Says, Alex, has Broderick Jones gotten any practice reps at left tackle, or has all of his reps been on the right side?
He's gotten a couple at left tackle when Fautani was come in at right tackle. It's very similar to last year when Broderick Jones would get the occasional left tackle with the first team. I mean, he got left tackle with the second team a lot last year, but occasional first team left tackle reps where Dan Moore would shift to right tackle. There were a handful of those. That's been the case so far, but a good 95+% of his snaps from Jones has been at right tackle 4 days in.
Second point he's got, I know he's been all world, but because of his age, should the Steelers be keeping an eye on Chris Boswell? He says, Dave, you said in the past that when it goes for kickers, it can go quickly, and Boswell is getting up there. Should the Steelers be proactive in preparing for that contingency plan? Look, when you rewind to last season, and the season before that, obviously 2022 was not a great season for Chris Boswell. You do have to kind of wonder back how much that groin, hip, played a part in the game. Obviously, he missed some games that year and all. But I think you got to look at this as what have you done for me lately? In 2023, boy, he more than bounced back from that 2022 season. And I suppose we're getting this question from Bryce because of, I guess, Boswell has missed a couple in the limited field goal session so far during camp. And look, if it's not injury related, yeah, I think. I mean, when it goes, you see it and it's there. I mean, there's a beginning and end for everything, right? I mean, at some point, Chris Boswell is not going to be the kicker for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm going out on a limb there. Even though it got reported that Boswell missed a couple. He's going to be this team's kicker this year. It is, as far as Bryce saying, should they be proactive in preparing for that contingency plan? Man, they got Matthew Wright in camp this year, and this is a guy that they're very familiar with. And it feels like, should Matthew Wright get cut at the start of the season and not wind up on another team's 53-man roster, even if he's on another team's practice squad, should things just go south of south with Chris Boswell, then that to me feels like their contingency plan.
Yeah, and in terms of the question, did they not want to put too much on Boswell's leg this summer? That's why you bring in a Matthew Wright, so he can handle some kicks in preseason action, and so Bos can kind of rest some, make sure he's good to go for week one. Yeah, I'm not going to be, I'm not setting the alarm bell off for the couple of missed kicks in the one session they've had so far. It's uncommon, a little surprised by it, I'll admit that, but we're going to need to see more struggles before we even start to open up the concern meter on Chris Boswell. And again, bringing in Wright will help save his leg. They don't have a second punter. They're going to trust Johnston and believe that he doesn't need the rest. But Boswell getting older, it's probably why they wanted to bring in that second kicker.
Look, there was nothing from last year to believe from Boswell that leads you to believe that he's going to fall off the cliff. But I mean, there's nothing to say that he can't either, especially he is up there in age. But until we see signs during the regular season and maybe it not be injury related, the guy bounced back big last year.
Right. And who knows? Maybe it's a holder thing where they're getting a relationship now with Cameron Johnston, the new holder. I couldn't identify that in the field goal session, wasn't really looking for it, probably wouldn't be able to tell otherwise unless it was so obvious about a bad snap or hold, which I didn't see to be the case. But holding can be so particular about the lean on the football and, those kinds of things, the timing of it all. So maybe they're just trying to get, some time together because Boz was, had Presley Harvin for so many seasons. Bill, I'm not worried is the bottom line. Not right now.
Me either. And until I have a reason to worry, I'm not going to worry about it. All right. We got some reader or listener emails in there. We got about almost a 90-minute show here on this Monday day off. Alex, you will be back out at St. Vincent College in Latrobe on Tuesday for a Tuesday morning practice. We will be back Tuesday later afternoon, evening for what would be the fifth special edition of the Terrible Podcast, recapping that. And then obviously, I think we'll have to turn around and do a full show for Wednesday, right? On top of that. So
it's going to be a busy day.
Yeah. So, and then the team's next day off when they return on Tuesday would be Sunday. Is that correct? Because they go 5 days, don't they?
I think it's the following Monday, but let me double check here. I think they go Tuesday to Sunday. Let me just double check because that's going to be important for me to know.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That would be 6 days in a row. Is that right?
Yeah, they go 6 days, and then they'll be off Monday, August 5th. Yeah, they've done that in the past. It's the heaviest schedule for sure. But they will go 6 straight days of practice.
All right. Watch your podcast machine for when these things drop. So in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter /X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com. Hit the donate button. Obviously, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com. Find the ad-free button. Follow the directions that way. So, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.